I never thought betrayal could arrive in the form of a single text message. Yet that's how it began: the unraveling of my marriage, the shattering of my illusions, the collapse of the life I thought was mine. My name is Elena. I'm 39 years old, and I have carried the weight of my family on my back for nearly 2 decades. I was a wife for 15 years, a mother to 2 beautiful children, and I believed with every fiber of my being that loyalty meant something. I was wrong. The day it happened was ordinary in the cruelest way. I had just finished folding the laundry, the smell of detergent clinging to my hands, when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I wiped my palms against my jeans, expecting a message from my daughter reminding me to pick up art supplies, or from my son asking if we could order pizza that night. Instead, I saw his name: Michael, my husband. The man who had once sworn in front of God and both our families that he would never abandon me. His words were clean, sharp, merciless. "I'm taking the kids and leaving. You'll hear from my lawyer." At first my mind refused to process it. I stared at the screen, waiting for another line, a correction, some explanation that this was a terrible joke. Nothing came. Just those words glowing against the black background of my phone, slicing through me like glass. My breath caught in my chest. I remember gripping the edge of the counter, the cool granite biting into my palms because I thought I might collapse. 15 years together reduced to a single message. No fight, no warning, no whispered confession of unhappiness. Just execution, swift and clean. I tried to call him. Once, twice, 3 times. Straight to voicemail. My own voice cracked as I left a message, half pleading, half demanding. "Michael, what is this? Call me back. Please, please." Silence answered me. The house around me suddenly felt cavernous. Empty. The hum of the refrigerator was too loud, the walls seemed to echo. I wandered through the living room, touching the backs of the chairs, the edges of the photo frames that lined the shelves. Pictures of our life together. Holidays, birthdays, vacations mocked me with their smiles. Had all of it been a lie? Had I been blind all these years to what he truly was? When I stepped into our bedroom, the truth hit harder. His side of the closet had been stripped. Shirts, suits, even the tie I had given him on our 10th anniversary, all gone. The jewelry box where I kept my grandmother's necklace sat open and hollow. Drawers stood ajar, emptied in haste. It hadn't been an impulsive decision. He had been planning this. For how long? I sank onto the bed, my chest heaving with sobs that felt torn from the marrow of my bones. Rage followed quickly behind the grief, a fiery tide rising in my throat. How dare he? How dare he shatter our children's world and cloak it in the pretense of legal language? "You'll hear from my lawyer," as if I were just a business transaction, a case file to be closed. But underneath the fury, deeper still, was something colder: suspicion. Michael wasn't impulsive. He was calculated. He worked with numbers for a living, always searching for pattern signals in the noise. And his message, it wasn't the cry of a desperate man. It was a maneuver. Step 1 in a plan I hadn't seen coming. That thought kept me awake the entire night, pacing the floor like a caged animal. Every creak of the house reminded me of what I'd lost. The sneakers my son had left by the door made my chest ache. The half-finished painting my daughter had been working on leaned against the wall, waiting for her return. How could he take them from me? What story was he spinning to justify tearing them away from their mother? By morning, exhaustion left me hollow, but clarity settled in. If Michael wanted a war, he would get one. I wasn't going to crumble. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to hand him the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. The first step was money. He had always controlled the accounts, always managed the finances under the guise of efficiency. I trusted him. And now that trust was a weapon he was using against me. I went online, scrambling through every login I could remember, but the balances had already shifted. Transfers I hadn't authorized drained the accounts where my paycheck had once gone. Credit cards in my name came back declined. He had cut me off before I even knew what hit me. I felt a fresh wave of panic, the kind that steals your breath and makes your fingertips go numb. How was I supposed to feed the kids? How was I supposed to keep a roof over our heads if he had already moved the pieces before I even saw the board? I thought of calling my sister, but then I remembered the last bitter argument we'd had. How she had warned me that Michael was too controlling, that his quiet patience wasn't kindness, but calculation. I had defended him. God, how I had defended him. I couldn't bear to call her now and admit she had been right. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and began to write everything down. Every transaction I remembered, every account we'd held together, every strange moment in the past year that suddenly felt suspicious in hindsight. It was my way of clawing back control, of refusing to drown in the chaos he had unleashed. Still, the silence of the house pressed in on me, suffocating. My children's absence was a physical ache, a wound that bled every time I glanced at their empty rooms. I didn't know where they were, what lies he was feeding them, or whether they cried for me at night. That uncertainty was worse than any financial ruin, worse than any betrayal. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the grief and rage, a spark caught fire. If Michael thought I would simply fold, if he thought I would cower, while he dismantled my life, he didn't know me at all. The second morning after Michael's text, I woke up with my eyes swollen from crying. The sheets still smelled like him, and for a moment, in that fragile space between dreaming and waking, I thought it had all been a nightmare. Then the truth slammed into me again, cruel and merciless. He was gone. He had taken our children, and he had left me not with explanations or apologies but with a threat. "You'll hear from my lawyer." That phrase looped in my head all day, a bitter mantra I couldn't escape. I moved through the house in a haze, touching the walls as if they could anchor me. Each object told a story: our family photos, the dent in the wall, where the kids had once crashed their toy car, the mismatched mugs we had collected from vacations. Everything screamed of a shared life, yet he had chosen to carve himself out of it like a surgeon excising diseased tissue. Only it wasn't disease he was cutting away, it was me. By afternoon I forced myself to act. Panic wouldn't save me, but maybe preparation would. I pulled out our old filing box, the one where I kept birth certificates, insurance policies, tax returns. My hands trembled as I flipped through the folders. That was when I noticed it. An envelope addressed in Michael's handwriting, tucked behind a stack of documents. My heart stuttered. Slowly, carefully, I opened it. Carefully. Inside were photocopies of bank statements I had never seen before. Accounts I hadn't known existed. Transactions in the thousands, withdrawals, transfers, luxury purchases I could not trace. My breath quickened as realization dawned. He had been preparing for this for months, maybe years. Every affectionate smile, every casual kiss, every shared meal had been shadowed by this betrayal. The worst part: the names. On several statements there were notations. Transfers labeled with initials. I didn't recognize recurring payments to something listed only as FC. I stared at those letters until my eyes burned. Who or what was FC? My stomach turned cold with dread. Was it another woman? Some hidden partner he had built this escape with? I slammed the folder shut, my pulse hammering in my ears. Betrayal cut deeper than absence. It was the knowledge that while I was tucking our children into bed, while I was planning dinners and folding his shirts, he was orchestrating my downfall behind closed doors. That night I couldn't eat. I sat in the kitchen, lights dimmed, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the silence. I wanted to scream, to break every dish in the cupboard, to claw at the walls until they bore the marks of my rage. Instead, I cried until my throat was raw, then wrote every detail I could remember into my journal. His late nights at the office, the mysterious phone calls he'd brushed off as work, the weekends he insisted on solo retreats for his mental health. My mind pieced it together like shards of glass in a puzzle, painful, jagged, undeniable. Still, grief is not linear. It surges, retreats, then comes back stronger. The next morning I thought I might collapse under the weight of it, but then the phone rang. I snatched it up, praying it would be one of my children, some proof they were safe. It was my daughter. Her voice was small, trembling. "Mom? Mommy?" The sound of her broke me wide open. I pressed the phone to my ear, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Sweetheart, are you okay? Where are you?" She hesitated, as though someone were listening. "Daddy says we're fine." "But..." Her voice wavered. "Mommy, why can't we come home? Why can't we sleep in our own beds?" Tears streamed down my face. I wanted to tell her everything, to pour the whole rotten truth into her ears. But I couldn't. She was 12 years old, too young to be a weapon in her father's war. So I swallowed my pain and forced my voice to soften. You'll come home, my love. I promise you. This is just a grown-up problem. None of this is your fault. Before I could say more, the line clicked dead. Silence. My daughter's voice stolen away like everything else. I sat at the table, clutching the phone, shaking. And then, for the first time since the nightmare began, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about Michael and me anymore. This was about my children, their safety, their future. And I refused, utterly refused, to let him twist their hearts with lies. He thought he had silenced me with his lawyer, with his money, with his carefully laid plans. But he didn't understand. He had lit a fire inside me that no amount of manipulation could extinguish. Revenge wasn't my nature. I had spent years swallowing slights, forgiving wounds, trying to keep peace in the name of love. But love had been betrayed. Trust had been shattered. And when those are gone, what's left is something harder, sharper. Survival, resolve. I began to plan. Planning became my lifeline. Each day I woke with the same dull ache in my chest, the same empty rooms echoing my children's absence, but instead of letting grief consume me, I turned it into fuel. Michael had chosen war, and if war was what he wanted, then war was what he would get, only not the kind he expected. He thought of me as fragile. He always had. The quiet wife, the mother content to orbit his world. He mistook my silence for weakness, my loyalty for naivety. He never understood that silence can hold power, that loyalty has limits. Now every breath I took hardened into determination. I started with evidence. Late one night, when the house was suffocating in silence, I pulled his old laptop from the back of the closet. It was dusty, abandoned, after he'd upgraded to a sleek new model last year. My hands trembled as I powered it on. The screen flickered, demanding a password. I tried the usual: our anniversary, the kids' birthdays, even the name of our dog. Nothing. For a moment, despair threatened to crush me. Then I remembered. Months ago, after one of his yoga classes, he had joked about his new enlightened password system. He had smirked, telling me I'd never guess it. A phrase he'd said. Something spiritual, memorable. My mind scrambled until the words surfaced. My truth shines one. He'd said it so many times after class, like a mantra. I typed it in, the screen unlocked, my breath caught in my throat. At first, the desktop seemed normal folders of old reports, random files. But then I saw it, an email account left logged in. I clicked, my pulse roaring in my ears. What I found made my stomach twist. Thread after thread between him and a name that made my skin crawl: FC. The same initials from the bank statements. Her name was Felicia Carter. Not just a woman, his so-called wellness coach, a parasite dressed up in spirituality. The emails were long, intimate, laced with plans that turned my blood cold. They spoke of freedom, of Bali retreats, of setting up the new life once the dust settles. One email, in Michael's own words, shattered me. Once Elena is served, we can push for the house. The kids will adapt. She'll fold, she always does. I felt the air leave my lungs. He wasn't just leaving me. He was strategizing my ruin, convinced I would crumble under the weight of it, and he was doing it for her. Scrolling further, I found a file attached to one of his messages. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the laptop. It was a spreadsheet, my life reduced to columns and rows. Retirement accounts, investment portfolios, the equity in our home. Every dollar I had trusted him to safeguard, listed neatly under headings like target and projected settlement. And at the bottom, a budget: expenses for him and Felicia. Condo mortgage, studio equipment, a line for discretionary spending. My children's futures traded for their lifestyle. I couldn't breathe. My body shook with a grief so violent it felt like rage. They hadn't just planned to take my family. They had planned to wear my life like a costume, parading in the wealth and comfort I had built. I snapped photos of everything with my phone, backing them up to a secure cloud I created that night. My tears blurred the images, but I didn't stop until I had documented every line, every damning word. By dawn, I had a file thick with evidence. When I finally called my sister, the one I had avoided out of shame, she answered groggily, but with a note of alarm in her voice. "Elena." "What's wrong?" I broke then. The words poured out: Michael's betrayal, the children, the secret accounts, Felicia. By the time I finished, my voice was hoarse and I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. There was silence on her end. Then slowly she said, "You're not crazy. You're not imagining this. He's been building this lie around you for years. But listen to me, you are not going to lose everything. You are not going to let him win." Her certainty became a balm, a fragile thread I clung to. She gave me the number of a lawyer she trusted. "She doesn't flinch," my sister said. "She will fight for you when you're too tired to fight yourself." That afternoon I sat across from the lawyer in her office, my folder of evidence trembling in my lap. She listened, eyes sharp, expression steady. When I finished, she tapped the file with one manicured finger. "Elena, this isn't just a messy divorce. This is calculated fraud. And he made a mistake. He underestimated you. We're going to use every word, every number, every lie he left behind. And when we're done, he'll wish he had walked away with nothing." For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt something stir in me. Not grief, not rage, but hope. Fragile, trembling hope. Michael thought he had written the end of my story with that single text. But I was only just beginning to write mine. The weeks that followed were some of the longest of my life. My lawyer, sharp, unflinching, and calm in ways I could only pretend to be, became my anchor. She told me to document everything, to resist every urge to scream or retaliate, and to let the evidence speak for itself. It wasn't easy. Every night I lay awake in a house that no longer felt like home, haunted by the sound of my children's laughter, that now lived only in memory. The silence was unbearable. The walls seemed to close in on me, each room a reminder of what Michael had stolen. My daughter's art project still leaned against the living room wall. My son's sneakers sat by the door waiting for feet that might never come back. The grief was sharp, but beneath it rage burned hotter. It kept me alive. Then came the call. My daughter's voice again, soft and trembling. "Mommy, why did you change the locks? Daddy said you don't want us back." The words gutted me. "Sweetheart, that's not true," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "The locks are the same. Your rooms are waiting just the way you left them. I want you home more than anything." But before I could say more, the line went dead. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. My lawyer's voice echoed in my mind. Parental alienation. It's classic and it's ugly. Michael wasn't just taking them physically, he was poisoning them against me. That night I fell to my knees in the kitchen and sobbed into my hands. But the grief didn't last long. It curdled into something sharper. He thought he could manipulate the children into hating me. He thought he could rewrite reality. But I had the truth, and the truth has teeth. It came to me unexpectedly while searching for my son's birth certificate in the study. I pulled open the filing cabinet, rifling through papers, and there it was, his old laptop. Dusty, forgotten. The very one that had revealed the emails between him and Felicia. I had already copied the damning evidence, but something made me pause. Had I taken everything? Had I missed something deeper? I powered it on again, heart pounding as the desktop blinked to life. I combed through the folders methodically, and then I found it, a notes document tucked away in a corner. When I opened it, my stomach turned to stone. It was titled The Phoenix Plan. Line by line, it outlined everything: the timeline for leaving the assets, to demand, even the phrases Felicia suggested he use in court filings to appear sympathetic. At the bottom was a chilling budget, neat and precise. House signed over, retirement account, monthly discretionary fund. And then, like poison, my name, written beside the phrase, "Elena will fold." I remember staring at those words until my vision blurred. They believed I was weak, that my love for my children would paralyze me, that I would hand over everything just to see them smile again. They believed wrong. I photographed every page. My hands were steady this time. No tears, no hesitation, only clarity. The next morning my lawyer's eyes flashed as she read through the file. Her lips pressed into a thin line of fury. Elena, this isn't just betrayal. This is attempted fraud. He and that woman didn't just want freedom, they wanted to strip you bare to leave you with nothing. Her voice sharpened. They've given us a gift, a very ugly one, but it will be their undoing. The following weeks were a blur of filings, affidavits, and quiet strategy. I moved like a shadow, silent but deliberate, each step measured. Meanwhile, Michael's camp grew desperate. His lawyer called mine first with threats, then with pleading. Their tone shifted from righteous outrage to weary compromise. It was clear the fantasy was crumbling. Reality was pressing in on them, but the hardest part wasn't the courtroom or the paperwork. It was the moments in between. Grocery shopping alone. Eating dinner at a table too quiet. Walking past the school and wondering if my children thought of me as often as I thought of them. There were nights I curled up on the floor of their rooms, clutching pillows that still smelled like them, whispering promises into the dark. I'm fighting for you. I won't stop, I won't let him win. The day of the temporary hearing arrived, and I walked into that courtroom with my head high, though my knees threatened to give out beneath me. Michael sat across from me, immaculate in his suit, Felicia's hand resting smugly on his shoulder. My stomach turned, but I kept my gaze forward. My lawyer stood tall and spoke with steady fire. She presented the texts, the poisoned phone call, the Phoenix plan. Each piece landed like a hammer. When the judge read aloud the line, "Elena will fold," I saw his face harden, his jaw tighten. And then came the ruling. Temporary sole custody awarded to me. Michael's visitation reduced to supervised hours in a controlled setting. The word supervised hung in the air like a thunderclap. His mask slipped just for a moment, and I saw the fury flash in his eyes. Felicia's smirk faltered. As I walked out of that courtroom, I felt the ground shift beneath me. This wasn't victory, not yet. But it was the beginning of his unraveling. The man who believed I would fold had just watched me rise. Walking out of the courthouse that day, the sunlight felt different. It wasn't warm, not comforting. It was sharp, cutting through the haze I had been drowning in for weeks. My children were coming home, even if only for now. For the first time since Michael's message, I felt like I had taken something back. When I arrived at the supervised visitation center a week later, I saw them. My daughter clung to me, her face buried in my chest, as if she had been holding her breath this entire time and could finally exhale. My son's little arms wrapped around my waist, tight, desperate. Tears soaked into my shirt, but for once they were not mine. They were theirs, spilling from the confusion and fear their father had seeded into them. Michael stood across the room, his face a storm of rage, barely hidden behind a practiced smile. Felicia wasn't there. Perhaps she couldn't stand to watch her carefully spun fantasy collapse under the weight of truth. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but the supervisor's presence kept him silent. All he managed was a cold glare that tried to pierce me. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. The weeks that followed were a grind of strategy and endurance. My lawyer pushed forward with evidence piece by piece, dismantling the illusion he and Felicia had built. A forensic accountant unearthed the hidden money trail, $30,000 siphoned away over the years, funneled into accounts Michael never declared. And then, like a final nail, the investigator uncovered Felicia's history. 2 other marriages torn apart in similar patterns, men left gutted while she vanished with their wealth. It wasn't love that bound them. It was greed. I watched as Michael's mask slipped in every hearing. The calm, confident man, who had once believed himself untouchable, now sat sweating under questions he couldn't answer. Each time the emails were read aloud, each time a document with his handwriting appeared before the judge, his shoulders sagged lower. But revenge is not fire, it is ice. It is slow, unrelenting, wearing down the edges of even the sharpest blade. I didn't scream. I didn't fight him in the hallways. I simply stood day after day and let the truth crush him. The final mediation wasn't dramatic. It wasn't shouting or slammed fists. It was silence broken only by the rustle of papers. My lawyer laid everything on the table: the fraudulent plan, the siphoned funds, the parental alienation, the evidence of Felicia's pattern. The choice was his sign or face charges that would end not just his case, but his freedom. His hands shook as he scribbled his name across the agreement. When it was over, he couldn't even look at me. Felicia's name was nowhere in the papers. She had vanished as parasites do when the host can no longer feed them. I walked out with full custody of my children. The house, the security I thought I had lost. But more than that, I walked out with my dignity intact, forged stronger than the man who tried to strip it away. Life after war is quieter, but never the same. Some nights when the children are asleep, I sit in the living room and let the silence wash over me. It is not the suffocating silence of abandonment anymore, but the steady hum of survival. My daughter laughs again. My son sleeps in his bed without fear. We are not unscarred, but we are together. As for Michael, he lives in a small apartment across town alone. Occasionally I see him at drop-offs. His suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He tries to mask it with bitterness, muttering that I destroyed our family. But the truth is, he destroyed himself. He handed me the knife and expected me to fall on it. Instead, I placed it gently on the table, turned, and walked away while he bled from his own cuts. The greatest revenge wasn't in watching him lose. It was in realizing that I had not. That the storm he unleashed had not swept me away, but carved me into something stronger. If you've made it this far into my story, thank you for listening, for bearing witness. Betrayal can hollow you out, but it can also remake you. If you're standing where I once stood, broken and afraid, hear me now. You are not as weak as they believe. The truth, your truth, is sharper than any weapon they wield. So please, if this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own battles, let me know. Like this video, share it with someone who might need strength, and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and resilience. And leave a comment. I want to know your story too. Together we remind each other we don't fold, we rise.